Hey, Uncle Chimpus here. I've got a real special run for you today. I've decided to try and beat Path of Exile 2 without ever using gems. And believe me, this is going to be a lot more challenging than the no mana challenge that I completed in my last video. So let's go over the ground rules for this run, starting off with rule number 1, which states that no skill gems, support gems or spirit gems are allowed. And the second rule is no granted skills. That means no skills granted by or triggered by equipment, and no skills granted by the passive skill tree or ascendancy. And the last rule states that this run has to be done in solo self-down mode. This time around I decided to start with Warrior, as his ascendancies are more suited for this type of challenge, I think. And just like last time, we have to have our tutorials disabled in the settings menu, as the tutorial forces you to use one of the gems that you gain while making your way through the coast. Finally, we reach the Miller. We haven't used any abilities up to this point, but as there's no way of defeating him without using any abilities, and believe me, I tried, we are forced to defeat him with basic attacks. And if anyone finds a way of skipping him, I'd be really interested in knowing how to do that. I myself tried various methods of trying to either despawn this boss or to warp to the city, but nothing worked so far. So we're about to defeat this boss, and from this point onward the rules I mentioned before are going to be enforced. Next up we pick up the quest reward from the blacksmith, which we're probably going to keep till the end of the game, as I don't want to cut any gems whatsoever, and this item cannot leave your inventory unless it's transformed into a level 1 gem. Even though this challenge is going to be a lot harder than the last one we did, it's going to be easier in one single aspect, and that's gearing. We have a lot of leftover equipment from our last run, and also we have a lot of gold which we can use to gamble for better gear. And since the rules are now enforced, the only viable option to deal damage is to use thorns. So after looking through all of the items that I collected on my last run, I decided to go with all of these uniques. They should increase our survivability quite a bit and give us some thorns damage so we can actually damage enemies. Before I forget, I think I should invest my skill points into armor. The melee damage nodes are not going to help us whatsoever, so we're probably going to focus on survivability at the start of the game. And we're going to deal with our first encounter now, so let's see how the damage is. Well, it's a bit lower than expected, but I still can kill the mobs relatively easily, so that's fine. After a few minutes of exploring, we finally found the witch, so let's see how this goes. Okay, this looks like it's going to take forever, so I'm going to fast forward a bit. Alright, so I'm doing this in voiceover. I fast forwarded this clip 10 times, and as you can see the damage is insanely bad. So I think we need some thorns upgrades before we tackle this boss again. By my estimations, the fight would have taken like over 15 minutes, so I think it was just a waste of time. I took her down to around half HP, and then I decided that it was a waste of time. I don't think there's a point in fighting her anymore. I don't think there's a point. I'd rather just level up a little bit, and it's gonna make things a lot easier. I'll just run out of her aggro range and then I'll go back to town to check whether there's some new equipment I can get. I changed some of my equipment, so I decided to give it another go. Specifically, we changed out our shield from the unique shield we had before to this rare shield. It has an additional physical thorns modifier, so that should increase our damage considerably, even though the modifier itself is pretty low. And still, even with this new shield, the damage seems definitely too low. I'll just go do some leveling, I guess. I decided to go to the Mud Burrow and to try and defeat the Devourer instead. Maybe this boss will be easier to defeat. Let's see. Well, if he hits me, he gets dealt 6 or 7 damage. Well, it's not great, but he doesn't have an energy shield, so it's definitely going to be easier than the witch. I think I'm just going to stay here and we'll see how long this takes.
2,000 years later.
Alright, so that was almost 10 minutes. Oh, nice! We got ourselves 2 uniques, pretty great. I think the ring we could use. As our DPS and survivability is still a bit too low, I decided to grind some levels in the Grellwood. After that, we're probably going to the Red Veil to fight the Rest King. And XP seems pretty good so far. We just got another level up, and we're probably going to invest it into regeneration. Alright, so see you in a few seconds when I think I'm ready to tackle the next area. And now that we arrived in Red Vale, we should probably now clear the obelisks and fight the Rust King. So, we encountered a really big problem. We're unable to kill any enemies that use only ranged attacks. So is the run over? Well, not necessarily. I still had some ideas how I could get past this hurdle. So let's go over them. First off, I decided to see if there are any damage alternatives that I could use. For example, items or passive skills. But the only conclusion that I came to is that our level is the main limiting factor here. Some items could help us get past this hurdle, but the level required to equip them is too high currently. The most obvious item, of course, being the Crown of the Pale King, but these items could also be used to solve this issue. So, if the level is the main issue, you might ask why not just level a little bit, and then you can equip those items and you can defeat enemies. Well, the thing is that if you level in a under-leveled zone, your experience rate keeps on decreasing. And it's not 1 or 2 levels that we need to get. But of course, this is still worth considering if the other options do not work out. But let's move on to them. So the second option I tried was to force the Obelisk to spawn only melee mobs. This would still be in line with our first objective, as we would get some experience, and it would only require some time and effort by trying to activate a bunch of obelisks to see how the spawn behavior works. So I'm not exactly sure about the number, but around 20 or 30 times I tried resetting each and every obelisk just to see if there's some variety in the spawning of mobs. And on one of those times, I actually only encountered melee enemies. In the end, I received one of the required pieces. But even though this gave me some hope that I could solve this problem without doing so much grinding, it turned out not to be the solution that I was looking for. Even though I lucked out and got that melee only spawn, I was not able to get it again, and I also figured out that you have to do all the 3 obelisks on the same map, as you won't receive the second and third piece if you do them on separate maps. So if this doesn't solve it, let's move on to option 3. I figured that maybe I could manipulate the NPC behavior. Maybe we could force the ranged enemies to use melee attacks instead of ranged, and so we won't have to utilize any other strategy. And this does work on some of the enemies. For example, the enemies that are in the same area that usually use ranged attacks can be forced into using melee attacks if you move close enough to them. But sadly, this does not work on the enemies that are spawned by the obelisk. And so we move on to the last idea I had on how we could manipulate the NPC behavior. Specifically the way the kill credits are accounted for when you kill the quest enemies. I just did a lot of testing and I had a hunch that when the game developers coded the obelisk themselves, they had to check whether the enemies are in the area of the obelisk itself, and if they left the area, maybe the obelisk could be destroyed and the quest objective would be completed. So I specifically used one of the obelisks and tried to drag the mob pack as far away as possible. And after dragging the mob pack to one of the corners of the map, I noticed that the quest objective was completed actually, and when I went to the obelisk, there was no quest item there. The very same idea seemed to work for a second time when we tried it on the other obelisk, and after this we managed to fight the Rust King. Due to the copious amount of testing, we're a bit overleveled for the area and the boss goes down pretty easily. We free the hooded one from the tree and make our way to Grimtangle. And while here, we're faced with another issue. The uniques that we picked up at the start are not cutting it anymore, and the enemies are close to killing us if we stand around too much. But even in our weakened state, we give defeating the 2 cemetery bosses a shot. Since Asenia has an energy shield, it's pretty hard to damage her consistently, so instead of choosing to waste our time here, I think that leveling would be a better idea. So I go and do that. So it took around 40 minutes of grinding, but we managed to get to level 11 and got ourselves a couple of new uniques. Our DPS has been greatly increased, but compared to a regular Thorns build we're still quite lacking. But now we can defeat Asinia and Graven, and we make our way to the last boss of the cemetery. The boss itself deals so little damage that surprisingly we don't even have to dodge most of his abilities to defeat him. And with him down, we unlock the ability to respec our points if we need it in the future and to identify items more easily. We take down the Crow Bell just as easily. We don't even have to dodge any of his attacks, and we invest the newly gained points into increasing our defenses further. We decide on skipping the King of the Mist boss for now, as the spirit upgrade does nothing for us. We find the loot for Una, and we also receive 2 passive skill points. The passive skill tree pathing currently is a bit unconventional, but we're trying our best to get to any thorn damage nodes. We stand around and watch as the Executioner executes some guy then himself. And after 4 riveting minutes of standing around, we defeat the Candlemass to receive the HP upgrade. And after reaching level 16, we're now able to equip one of our best in slot items, the Crown of the Pale King. This item is incredibly good because it allows us to retaliate to projectile attacks, which we couldn't do earlier. This not only helps us fight mobs that only use ranged attacks, but also helps with bossing. Certain bosses, like the Count himself, have certain attacks that cast a lot of projectiles, and you can retaliate for each projectile that was cast and hits you. This results in you being able to retaliate multiple times, resulting in large amounts of damage being dealt to the boss. With the Count down, we're almost finished with Act 1, but we still have to defeat the Witch in Clearfell and also the King of the Mists. Now that we outlevel the content so much, the bosses take only seconds to defeat instead of minutes, and we get ourselves the cold resistance and the spirit upgrade. Now let's make our way to Act 2.